Centralia, Pennsylvania, is the story of a town that burned from the inside out, lost almost every one of its residents, and then did something nobody planned for. It came back to life. Centralia sits in Columbia County, about 2 hours northwest of Philadelphia, and at its peak, in 1890, it held 2,761 people, 7 churches, 5 hotels, 14 general stores, and 27 saloons. By 2020, that number had collapsed to 5. Fewer than 10 people remain there today. Street signs still mark intersections that lead nowhere. Sidewalks still run in front of empty lots. And in the spaces where houses once stood, something quiet and unexpected has been taking hold. To understand what Centralia became, you first need to understand what it lost and how quickly that loss arrived. Anthracite coal came to this valley in 1856, and for the better part of a century, it defined everything about the place. The jobs, the identity, the reason anyone lived there at all. Most of the large-scale operations had already wound down by the time the 1960s arrived, but around 1,500 people still called the borough home. On May 27, 1962, the Centralia Borough Council hired 5 members of the local volunteer fire company to clean up the town landfill, sitting in an abandoned strip mine pit just outside the borough limits. Memorial Day cleanups like this one had happened before, and the crew set the dump on fire the way they always had. That night, they doused the visible flames with water, and 2 days later, the flames came back, and a week after that, they came back again. And when firefighters finally dug through the burned garbage with bulldozers looking for the source, what they uncovered was a hole at the bottom of the trash pit, a gap that nobody had filled with fire-retardant material, sitting directly above the labyrinth of abandoned coal mines running beneath the town. A coal seam caught. Coal, given oxygen and space, does not go out on a human schedule. $7 million went into extinguishing the Centralia fire over the following 2 decades, and none of it worked. The underground mine network offered a fuel supply that was nearly impossible to exhaust, and the fire spread along seams that shifted in directions nobody could reliably predict or fully excavate. As journalist David Deacock documented in his book Fire Underground, the blaze became something entirely beyond human control. Residents living closest to the burn started reporting burning eyes and the taste of sulfur in the late 1970s, then headaches, then respiratory problems, and by the early 1980s, trees had begun dying and roads had begun to buckle from the heat below. What changed everything nationally came on February 14, 1981, when 12-year-old Todd Domboski cut through his grandmother's backyard and the ground simply opened under his feet. 4 feet wide and 150 feet deep, the sinkhole swallowed him whole. And the only reason he survived was that his hands found an exposed tree root on the way down and held on until his cousin reached him and pulled him out. Carbon monoxide had already begun filling the hole. Congress appropriated $42 million in 1984 to buy out the properties, demolish the buildings, and relocate whoever remained. Pennsylvania Governor Bob Casey invoked eminent domain over every remaining property in the borough in 1992. The Postal Service canceled Centralia's zip code in 2002, and in 2013, the Commonwealth reached a final agreement with the last holdouts, letting them stay until they died, after which the land would return to the state. A community of more than 1,000 people, reduced to fewer than 10 across roughly 30 years. Visit Centralia today, and what hits you first is not wreckage. Most of the buildings are gone, demolished over years by the Columbia County Redevelopment Authority following the eminent domain order, and what remains in their place is a grid of streets that run intact through what looks, from a distance, like open meadow and young forest. Underneath all of it, the fire keeps burning, spanning 3,700 acres across an 8-mile stretch, with underground temperatures recorded above 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It carries enough fuel to continue for another 250 years. Steam vents dot the southern end of the borough. Smoke rises from fissures in the ground and from cracks in the abandoned stretch of Pennsylvania Route 61, which the state permanently closed after the fire destroyed the underground pillars holding the road up. This section became known as Graffiti Highway, a pilgrimage site for visitors drawn to the eerie landscape, until the state buried it under truckloads of dirt in 2020. And yet the word that keeps appearing when writers and visitors try to describe Centralia is not devastation, it is beauty. The town famously inspired the Silent Hill video game and film franchise, but what exists there now tells a different story entirely. Vegetation has moved across most of the land where houses once stood, with paved roads still running through what now reads, at a casual glance, as open field. New-growth forest has begun filling certain sections, and wild plants have spread across the former residential lots without anyone guiding them. Remove the mowing, remove the maintenance, remove the foot traffic, and it turns out the land knows exactly what to do next. 60 years after the fire condemned this town, Centralia has become a place dense with wild plants and butterflies. The kind of place that, if not for the roads cutting through it, you could easily mistake for land that had never been touched. Nobody designed the rewilding of Centralia. No program commissioned it, no architect planned it, and what actually happened is simpler, and in some ways more striking than any managed restoration. Humans left, and nature filled the space on its own timetable through a process of ecological succession. That said, there is an active chapter to this story as well. In 2021, the Eastern Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation, known as EPCAMR, planted 250 apple trees across the former town site, not to reconstruct what once existed, but to accelerate what was already underway, building habitat, drawing wildlife, and formally marking Centralia as a place where nature now sets the terms. Alongside that planting, EPCAMR established Centralia as an official Monarch butterfly waystation, putting milkweed and pollinator plants into the former residential lots and partnering with local community programs to raise and release butterflies at the site. What the organization found when they arrived was that the passive rewilding had largely gotten there first. Encouragement was not really what the land needed. It needed the mowing to stop, the buildings to come down, and the people to step back. And all of that had already happened long before anyone showed up with apple trees. The underground fire that gutted Centralia also set unusual conditions in motion above ground. Disturbed soil, collapsed impermeable surfaces, the end of regular human traffic across the land, and decades of growth with nobody interfering. What those conditions produced, combined, is what ecologists call an involuntary park, a place that has genuinely come alive. Centralia keeps pointing at the same thing that rewilding stories keep pointing at, that the most powerful move available is sometimes doing nothing at all. Vancouver stopped mowing certain patches of parkland and watched bee diversity double. Chernobyl's exclusion zone, cleared of humans after the 1986 disaster, grew into one of the most species-rich areas in Europe. Centralia, emptied by a fire nobody could stop and an evacuation nobody wanted, became a meadow, a young forest, a butterfly waystation, a place where wild plants colonize the driveways and front yards of a community that no longer exists. None of this erases the real hazards still present. Ground instability, carbon monoxide rising through fissures, ongoing risk for the handful of people who remain. That part of the story is not a triumph. What keeps appearing above that fire, though, tells a different story entirely, one that shows up across habitats and continents and very different kinds of disruption. Given the opening, nature moves back in. Not always fast, not always in the form you would have predicted, but with a consistency that gets harder to dismiss the more examples you collect. A century of human settlement built Centralia, and a fire took most of it apart. What grew back was not what stood there before, but something grew back, and it is still growing now. If you want to go deeper on this one, look up the Eastern Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation and their ongoing work at the Centralia site. The story of how a coal disaster became a butterfly waystation does not get told nearly as often as it should. This channel covers nature coming back in places people least expect it, backed by real research and real numbers, with a new video every week. If that sounds like something you want more of, subscribing takes about 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps the channel grow. Drop a comment and tell me the most surprising place you have ever seen nature reclaim something humans left behind. I read every single one. See you next week. Pretty cool that I'm alive and have better days. I could walk, see, hear, I should celebrate. Think I could change my mind, maybe elevate.